A young couple chooses to begin a romantic relationship but agrees to keep it hidden due to being colleagues. In a shadowy alley under the cover of night, a man proposes the idea of a secret relationship to a woman. Elsewhere, in an office, two co-workers discuss the topic of workplace romances. Both women speculate that something is going on between a sales employee and someone in HR, deducing this from the similar souvenirs they brought back from trips and the fact they requested the same day off. An employee, Masubu Tateishi, 28 years old, overhears their conversation but pays it little mind until a woman, Shizuno Hayakawa, 32, approaches and asks him what he thinks about workplace romances. He casually responds that he doesn't have an opinion. The two gossiping employees behind him mention that two new hires were dating until last month. Tateishi tells Shizuno that dating a coworker isn't something he would consider. Another coworker, Aria Morizono, overhears and adds that people involved in workplace romances are often bad employees. The two gossipers get excited, saying that having a secret relationship must be thrilling. Aria, hearing this, assumes it must feel like some sort of game. Tateishi thinks that if that's the case, he has even more reason not to date someone at work. With that, Shizuno ends the conversation and returns to work. Tateishi sighs in relief, thinking they can move on, but then he hears a voice calling him. It's Yui Mitsuya, 28 years old. Tateishi is dazzled by her beauty, but her sweet expression quickly turns sour as she scolds him for rejecting her receipts again. Mitsuya waves the receipt in his face, insisting it's filled out correctly. Tateishi takes it and explains that the deputy manager is strict about these things. Mitsuya accuses Tateishi of being smug because he works in accounting. He rejects her receipt once more, and Mitsuya grabs it angrily, calling him a paper pusher. Their co-workers watch the argument in silence, wondering why the two, who started working at the same time, can't get along better. Later, at Tateishi's apartment, Mitsuya greets him cheerfully and apologizes for being so harsh at work. Tateishi sighs in relief, thinking she might leave him after what happened the day before. Mitsuya explains that she wasn't sure how harshly to act, since they just started a relationship the previous day. Tateishi asks if they're still together, and Mitsuya assures him they are. After all, she's at his place. The two are known for arguing a lot at the office, but it turns out it was because they liked each other. After some time, they finally started a relationship. Tateishi offers Mitsuya a drink and confirms if she really wants to keep their relationship a secret. Mitsuya says she does and asks if he's okay with that. Nervously, Tateishi admits he'd like to talk normally, unlike how they did that day. Mitsuya immediately rejects the idea. Tateishi freezes, imagining how harsh she'll be during work hours. Mitsuya explains that if she doesn't exaggerate, she won't be able to hide her feelings for him. She begins laying out some rules. No eye contact, meeting at least 3 train stations away from work, staying at each other's homes on days off, and no public dates. Tateishi can't say no when looking at his adorable girlfriend, but he asks to go out on days off. Mitsuya firmly says they can't let their guard down. Tateishi wonders why she seems so happy about this arrangement. Remembering his coworker's comments, he suspects Mitsuya sees this as a game to make their relationship more exciting. But he doesn't like that idea. It's not that he wants to be overly affectionate in public, he just wants their relationship to feel more normal every day. He calms down, convincing himself he's overthinking. Mitsuya suggests they can go out in public if they wear masks and apologizes for the many restrictions. She explains she just wants to avoid gossip at work or problems in their relationship. Tateishi understands and also wants to avoid workplace drama. They both agree to try to keep their relationship a secret. Mitsuya admits that now that they're finally together, she wants to protect what they have. Tateishi accepts that all these rules are the price of falling for a coworker. Mitsuya also admits she'd be embarrassed if everyone knew about their relationship. Hearing this, Tateishi pulls her close, joking that her embarrassment is the most exciting part. A few days later, a busy work season begins. In the planning department, someone needs to go to accounting to check on a receipt. Mitsuya tries convincing herself not to volunteer, but it's no use. She offers to go. However, her coworker reminds her she can't, as she always ends up saying something rude in accounting. Her co-workers decide to settle the matter with rock, paper, scissors, while Mitsuya laments that she hasn't seen her boyfriend all week due to their workloads. That night, Tateishi celebrates finishing his tasks and receives a message from Mitsuya saying she left work earlier than him. When he leaves, he texts Mitsuya to ask if he can call, but she's already asleep, so they don't get to talk. The next day, Tateishi runs toward the elevator with his boss. feeling exhausted from all the work. He knows there's still much more to do and wonders if anything will miraculously restore his energy. The elevator doors open a few floors earlier, and Mitsuya enters. She stands next to Tateshi without making eye contact. Earlier that morning, Mitsuya replied to his previous message with an apology for taking so long to respond, explaining that she had fallen asleep. Tateshi sneaks a glance at her and notices her cold expression. Hayakawa thanks Mitsuya for assisting her deputy manager a few days ago and apologizes for delegating the task. Mitsuya asks if everything was handled well, and Hayakawa praises her, saying the work was perfect. Mitsuya thanks her for the compliment, but insists it wasn't anything special. Hayakawa adds that the deputy manager doesn't usually praise people like that, and asks Tateshi if he doesn't think Mitsuya is amazing. Tateshi didn't expect to be dragged into a conversation with her, but without looking at her, he mentions that Mitsuya stands out from the rest. Mitsuya, delighted, asks if he's being sarcastic. Seeing Mitsuya's reaction, he adds that they should have consulted her department directly instead of passing the task along. Hayakawa agrees and tells Mitsuya to feel free to decline if it happens again. Tateshi comments that some people find it difficult to say no. Mitsuya, slightly flustered, replies that it wasn't a big deal. Tateshi thinks they're faking it well, but notices Mitsuya's ears turning red and worries someone might notice. Hayakawa quickly observes that the two get along well, which reassures her, as she thought they didn't get along at all. She asks them to be kind to each other. Mitsuya panics and claims she doesn't remember Tateshi's name. Tateshi provides it while thinking his girlfriend is being far too obvious. There are still several floors left before they reach their destination, and Tateshi feels himself succumbing to Mitsuya's cuteness. He laments that after so long, they've finally encountered each other, but they can't be alone. More people get on the elevator, which calms him down, as it means they won't be forced to interact much. Until Mitsuya speaks to him in a low voice, saying she thought their boss might catch on. Tateshi tries to ignore her, but Mitsuya keeps pushing, so he attempts to tell her she was too obvious. They both continue trying to act natural. At one point, their hands brush briefly. They try to avoid it but can't resist and hold hands for a moment, recharging their energy to keep going. That night, they talk on the phone, happy that the busy season is ending and they can go to the movies the next day. Mitsuya is thrilled to go out with him again, and since the theater is far from the office, she's not worried about being discovered. Mitsuya asks how they'll address each other now, given that they've been dating for a while. She wants him to call her by her first name. Tateshi says he's already used to calling her Mitsuya, but she insists on being called Yui. She says it feels more special and makes it a new rule. The next day, Tateshi is late for their date. When he arrives, he discovers that Yui got a new hairstyle while waiting for him, wanting to look pretty for their first date in a long time. Tateshi tells her she looks beautiful and calls her by her first name, which makes her blush and get embarrassed. Annoyed, she scolds him for calling her that so suddenly. He reminds her it was her idea. Yui accepts it and tries to call Tateshi by his first name, but fails. Tateshi encourages her to try again, but she accuses him of pressuring her into doing something so embarrassing. He reminds her that she made him do it first and insists it's part of the new rule. Yui pleads with him, exhausted, to stop pressuring her. They go into the movie theater, and Tateshi realizes Yui is stronger than he thought. Yui holds his hand, and Tateshi wonders how she can do it without being as embarrassed as he is. After the movie, Tateshi asks where she'd like to have dinner when suddenly someone recognizes Yui, an ex-employee they haven't seen in a long time. It's a handsome man named Seiya who invites Yui out to eat to celebrate their reunion. Then he notices Tateshi. Seiya was the one who trained them at the office and happens to be Yui's former crush. The three of them go to a restaurant together. There, Seiya congratulates Yui on all she's achieved since he left, which Yui gratefully acknowledges, much to Tateshi's dismay. He recalls how everyone in the office used to talk about the chemistry between Yui and Seiya. Seiya explains that he returned for a business trip, but went to the theater out of boredom. Both Yui and Tateshi panic, worrying that he might have seen them before the movie. But Seiya says he arrived late to the showing. Yui nervously lies, denying she saw a movie with Tateshi, who adds that they only ran into each other just before Seiya arrived. Tateshi thinks that if they keep this up, they'll get caught, but begins to wonder if it's really such a bad thing. After dinner, they bid Seiya farewell. He apologizes for imposing on them and playfully winks before leaving. Finally able to relax, Yui thanks Tateshi, calling him by his first name, saying she felt it was the right moment. Tateishi remarks that it took her long enough and teases her for easily addressing Seiya by his first name. Flustered, Yui tries to justify herself, but Tateishi stops her and leans in for a kiss. She stops him, saying they almost got caught earlier, so they decide to save it for when they get home. The next morning, Yui wakes up, recalling all the times she said Tateishi's first name and feeling shy about it. On their way to work, Tateishi wonders if it's suspicious that Yui is wearing the same outfit as the day before. She assures him she has a change of clothes in her locker, so it won't be a problem as long as she changes before anyone notices. They've never seen anyone from work at this train station, so they feel safe. However, they still plan to take separate trains. When Tateishi gets on his train car, he runs into Morizono, who recently moved to this part of the city.
When getting off the train, our protagonist once again runs into his fiancée, realizing that he broke rule number 1, which is not meeting in public places or at the train exit. However, this was purely a coincidence. Nevertheless, this made Yui very uncomfortable, while at the same time, the protagonist didn't know what to do, whether to ignore her or go along with her. He concluded that it was simply a stroke of luck. Despite the awkwardness, they both decided to interact as usual, behaving like two people who absolutely despise each other. As night fell, they decided to go to a restaurant to rest and enjoy something delicious. There, the protagonist asked Yui if she was tired since she seemed quite exhausted. She admitted it was true but assured him it would all be over soon. Rewinding to the past, we see that Yui was deeply flustered, unsure whether to choose sample A or sample B for the sweets exhibition. Hearing her predicament, a passing girl suggested asking someone from accounting, as they are typically good with such matters. At the accounting office, our protagonist was working on his tasks when his boss suddenly asked him to help with something heavy. Unexpectedly, Yui appeared in front of him, making him think she was there to see him. However, she walked straight toward Miss Marizono. Marizono quickly accompanied Yui to test both sweet samples, eventually stating that based on her data, sample B was the better choice. Impressed by Marizono's dedication, Yui immediately agreed and thanked her sincerely for her commitment. Nevertheless, she felt a bit embarrassed and asked Marizono not to tell anyone about this, as these tasks seemed too feminine, something she wanted to avoid at all costs. It was then that Yui confessed she couldn't resist when overwhelmed by her love for such delicious things. Hearing this, Yui remembered the feelings she experiences when seeing the protagonist, telling Marizono she completely understands. This comment made the bespectacled girl doubt her, which put Yui on high alert. Yui insisted she wouldn't reveal her secret to anyone. This behavior made Marizono even more suspicious, noting that Yui was kinder and more charming than she had initially thought. Marizono then commented that Yui doesn't treat Tateishi the same way, which, of course, made Yui even more nervous about the possibility of her secret being discovered. Unexpectedly, Marizono admitted she understood why Yui treated him a bit harsher than others, because he is very demanding and serious. Hearing this, Yui couldn't stop thinking about her beloved, reflecting on how he is an incredibly kind and considerate person, which made her feel lucky to see that side of her fiancé. Surprisingly, Marizono admitted that Tateishi is a good person, because when things get tough, he always says, "It is what it is," showing he is calm and understanding. This triggered a memory for Yui. She recalled a day in the past when she accidentally dropped all her notes. Masugu suddenly appeared in front of her and helped pick up everything. From that day on, she has been hopelessly in love with him. Back in the present, Yui began to open up to Marizono, admitting that he always solves the most complicated problems and is incredibly skilled at what he does. However, as she kept talking, she almost confessed that she was in love with him. Thankfully, Marizono stopped her, saying she didn't know Tateishi well enough to speak about him so extensively. As night fell, the protagonist and his fiancée were at their apartment washing dishes. Masugu admitted to feeling tired and stiff, prompting Yui to offer him a relaxing massage to help him feel better. During this moment, he asked her why she had gone to see Marizono. Yui recounted everything that had happened and mentioned learning about his reputation thanks to Marizono. After hearing all of this, the protagonist told Yui that she had been very considerate that day. He then revealed to her that all day long she had wanted to touch him, which made her feel happy. Hey, don't think about it too much. She just wanted to hug him and be affectionate. The next day at the office, Yui began handing out a bunch of sample cookies to everyone working there, saying that this was also thanks to Marizono. After distributing them to everyone, she approached a young man, gave gave him a muffin and helped him with his tasks. Surprised, the young man thanked her for everything. Meanwhile, our protagonist was being scolded by his boss, who criticized the report for having too many columns. Upon returning to his office, the women there reassured him that the deputy director was always harsh, so he shouldn't worry too much. However, during his break, the protagonist looked visibly frustrated, as the report only had 2 extra columns, something insignificant for such a well-done task. It was then that 2 young men, Karumatsu and Tamura, approached him and asked why he seemed so down. However, he chose not to share what had happened. Unexpectedly, Yui appeared before them, looking surprisingly cheerful instead of upset. She used the moment to hand out samples of her product to everyone present, while Magusu tried his best to hide his irritation from work. As expected, she also gave a muffin to him since it was part of her job. When the protagonist tasted it, he merely said it wasn't bad. This response annoyed Yui, who demanded he be honest about the flavor. Thus, he began to explain each flavor he experienced while tasting the muffin in detail, pointing out the only flaw. The chocolate left his hands slightly messy. This made Yui realize an important detail she had overlooked. After thanking him for his feedback, she left. As the evening approached, Hayakawa invited her colleagues out for drinks, saying they deserved a break after working so hard. The protagonist considered it and remembered his fiancée would be attending a work party, so he accepted to take his mind off things. At the party, Hayakawa got very drunk and made a fool of herself in front of everyone. To his surprise, Yui was also at the party. They ran into each other without prior notice. Meanwhile, 2 handsome young men were drinking with Tatishi, inviting another young man sitting in the corner to join. He admitted that he wasn't into such activities. Feeling uncomfortable, he pretended to take a phone call to escape the awkward situation. The protagonist noticed this and was puzzled, but the women explained that the man had transferred to their office only 2 months ago, which made him a bit reserved. Since the day Yui talked to him, however, he had opened up more and even started drinking with them occasionally. This surprised the protagonist, who began to suspect that this young man might have feelings for his fiancée. He observed his girlfriend closely, only to realize she had drunk too much and could barely stand. Drunk, she wandered away from the group, and Masugu decided to check on her, discovering she was about to vomit. Despite her protests, saying she didn't want anyone to worry about her, Masugu helped her by rubbing her back to make her feel better. She kept insisting he stop, worried someone might see them, but he refused, saying it was normal to help someone in that condition. Taking advantage of the moment, she grabbed his hand, saying it felt cool and soothing, before falling asleep on his lap. Suddenly, the shy young man from earlier, Somai, appeared in the bathroom, apologizing for the awkward situation and saying he hadn't left yet. This put the protagonist on high alert, unsure of what to say. Then, Somai unexpectedly asked a shocking question. Were they secretly dating? He promised not to tell anyone, leaving the protagonist with no choice but to admit the truth. The next day, our protagonist decides to go on a date with his fiancée, but as usual, they must wear face masks. This time, however, Yui feels much more anxious than before, worrying that Somai might have been too drunk to remember what he was told. Things escalated to the point where Yui considered confronting and cornering Somei to silence him, but the protagonist calmed her down, assuring her that Somei didn't seem like the kind of person to reveal secrets. Still, both carried the internal fear of being fired since the company strictly prohibited romantic relationships between coworkers outside of work. This deeply concerns Masugu, as he realizes how hard Yui has worked in the competition, and he doesn't want her to lose her job over a simple romantic relationship. At the same time, Yui shares the same sentiment, implying that she doesn't want his reputation to suffer because of her. However, the protagonist reassures her, saying that everything will be fine and remain the same as before. The next day at the office, he feels incredibly nervous about what Yui told him, not wanting to risk his reputation. Unexpectedly though, this time the deputy director approved his work on the first try. Feeling motivated, the protagonist decides to take a break, during which he runs into Somai. When Somai turns to look at him, he seems to realize he's become involved in a serious secret. Despite this, Somai doesn't understand why they are so determined to keep their relationship a secret from everyone. After an extensive explanation from the protagonist, Somai admits that by keeping their relationship under wraps, the work environment does indeed feel much better. The protagonist asks Somai not to reveal their secret to anyone. A bit perplexed, Somei agrees, saying he'll keep quiet only because he owes Yui a lot. Besides, he doesn't think they'll actually get married or anything. As the protagonist leaves the building, he reflects on what Somei said, thinking how wonderful it would be to marry Yui someday, but he knows he still has a long way to go before that. If you've made it this far into the video, don't forget to write the word exquisito in the comment section. Thank you so much, and see you in the next video.